Okay, so back to our pillow, and we're going to use what we just learned and try and apply it to this pillow. So, very first thing we want to do is change the cycles render. Next, we want to apply a material to this pillow. So we'll come across to the material tab and just add a new. Okay. So this pillow we've already unwrapped. We can see our unwrap down here, which is fine. So let's drag a new window across here, and we'll change this one down here to a node editor. Okay, and you can see that the standard default setup is there, but we like to add a little bit of specularity, a bit of glossy into it. So we'll Shift A, add a shader and a glossy shader, and we'll also Shift A and we'll add a mix shader. So I'll drop that in there, bring this up here, and that is kind of basic. I know already from experience that 0.2 is going to be too much, so I'm going to come down to about 0.05. Helps if I highlight it. Okay, so this is a basic material setup. We want to create a new texture, so we'll press new, and we'll call this one pillow texture. I normally turn off alpha as a matter of course, unless I specifically want an alpha channel. So we create a pillow texture. One thing's interesting here, I think we've covered this before, we have with the Suzanne body, is we can actually add some kind of grid. Okay, so I'm going to add, actually let's do a color grid to this new texture, so we'll have something to look at. Okay, so we have a texture, and now we need to bring this texture into the node editor, so we've got something to bake to. So Shift A, and we'll add a texture and an image texture, and we'll just open it up as the pillow texture. If I now go into a texture mode, you can see that our texture is actually mapped quite nicely. It's at an angle, but we can change that if we wanted, you know, to kind of straighten these up, although at an angle looks quite good. But just for the sake of it, let's go into edit mode. Okay, and let's select one point on one side of the pillow. We'll use the L key, so it selects all the linked vertices on that side, and I can rotate. Now you see here where it's pulling the other side. The reason for that is because I still have my proportional editing on. Okay, so it's either here or the O key. So I'll just press the O key to turn it off, and you can see it's gone greyed out. Now if I rotate this, you can see it rotates without the influence on the other side, but this is actually the reverse side. So let's turn this around. Let's rotate this so it's kind of square. Doesn't have to be precise, it's a pillow. Okay, and we can do the same with this side. So I press L there. Let me just turn this around this side and rotate it so it's kind of a bit square. Alright, so that's the material and texture sorted out. The next thing we want is to add some light. So first of all, let's come across to the world tab, and we'll use nodes. We'll come down here to the world tab. We want the background color to be a lot whiter, maybe with a hint of something slightly yellowish. It's very subtle indeed. Okay, and we already decided that the strength was way too high with our other project, so let's turn that down to about 0.2. Okay, if we go into the world background mode here, that's looking slightly green actually, isn't it? Yeah, I am on the green side. You know, if I come across the yellow. Actually, let's just leave it kind of more whitish anyway. Somewhere around Okay, so we have that. Now we need to add a light source, a directional kind of lamp. So let me just go into the side view because I want the lamp to come from this way. I'm just going to scroll in a little. I'm going to Shift A to add a lamp, and I'm going to make that a sun lamp, which appears on the 3D cursor. It's actually because that's where everything spawns. So let me just grab that sun lamp and put it up here. Okay, I want the light direction to kind of like be above, high up. So I've moved my sun lamp up high. I'm just going to rotate it. Okay, so it's going to hit about there. That's the direction of the light rays. Okay, now go into the front view. This is square on, which is fine, but I want to be a little different, so I'm going to move it off to the side and again rotate this into it. So the light's actually coming from the top left. Okay, so that should be good. Let me come back down into the object data again. Once again, I've got this lamp selected, so I'll select my pillow, which brings this back. We could do a kind of like a base color. Let's go with the red again. We could have a quick check how things are looking by going into the render view in the viewport shading. And you can see there, it's got a kind of very vinyl look, which is okay if you like vinyl pillows. Let's bring this factor down a little, just so we get that hint of light at the top. Very touchy this, 0.3, yeah, 0.03, that's looking kind of okay. Now this roughness slider, the smoother it is, the more to left it is, the more mirror-like the reflection is. So if I turn this all the way down, you can see we're getting this very, very faint, bright white mirror image of the sun building up. And that's not what we wanted. We want it a bit rougher. So, and the more rough it is, the more kind of diffuse and spread out it becomes. Okay, so it is a fine balance, once again. Where are we going? Let's try 0.1. Sometimes a lot of this is trial and error. What did I do there? Something terribly wrong. 0.1 and enter. Okay, yeah, that's kind of like 0.05. It's kind of too diffused there. That's looking better. It's got this definite kind of I don't know what you describe it, kind of like a flatter, less reflective look. So more of the red's coming out. Alright, let's go back into solid mode. So we have this this kind of setup. We could bake that now, but I actually don't want a plastic or a vinyl looking pillow. So I'm going to add an input texture here, another texture. So let me select this. I'll Shift D to duplicate it, bring a new one across, and I will connect the likewise colors, the yellow to the yellow color nodes. Okay, and now I do have a texture that I just quickly downloaded that I'm going to use, which is like a pinstripey type of texture. So I'm going to press this open here, and I think I called it pinstripe when I downloaded it. There it is, pinstripe. We'll open that image, and if I change this to the pinstripe, there you can see the texture I got there. Okay, right, so let's have a look at this in textured view to get an idea of what's going on. You can see now it's projecting this pinstripe texture on. It's actually, I'd want it to go up and down rather than left and right, so I'm going to need to rotate these UVs again. So this one's already selected. I can press R and bring it around about 90 degrees, so it's going up and down. I can do the same with the next. So with the other side, select a vertex, press L to select all the link vertices, R and rotate it about 90 degrees. Okay, so let's go back into object mode. That's kind of the look I was going for. Let's have a look at this now in a rendered view. Okay, you can see it's still a bit plasticky up here. You know, this strong light here. So let me come down and make that 0.2. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, it's still a bit. I want a bit more roughness. 0.3. There we go. That's looking a bit better for this application anyway. We've got a definite light source up here. If we rotate round the back, it is looking that little bit darker. Yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. So let's go ahead and bake this and see how our texture turns out. So just to stop the lagging, I'm going to turn this back to a texture view. I'm going to make sure this image texture is selected. It's turned back to this grid texture because that is what the pillar texture actually is. It hasn't baked this pinstripe onto it yet, so that's quite normal. So we'll select the image texture, make sure that's selected. We can come back to our render tab, down to the bottom to bake, and we shall bake this. So I'm going to start the bake now, and I'm going to pause the video while it's baking, although it is baking quite quickly, but I still don't feel like waffling for 2 minutes, so we'll be right back. Okay, that is baked. We've got a message up here saying baking map saved to internal image, saved to excuse me. Basically you need to save it. Blender, if you were to close Blender or something, it wouldn't remember it. So let's do that now. You'll see beside the image we got this asterisk, and that asterisk means there is an unsaved image. So with this image selected, I'm just going to go into the image menu and I'm going to save as image, or the shortcut's F3, and it's already called pillar texture. I'm saving it to my desktop. I'm making sure there's no alpha channel because I really don't need one, and I don't want to cause issues with alpha stacking. So the options here are black and white, red, green, blue, or red, green, blue and alpha. So red, green, blue, which is colour. All that looks okay, and I'm going to save that image. Okay, so you can see how the image is as baked. We do have you know, kind of the light and dark areas I was looking for, which is great. This seam is actually looking very nice and natural, how a real pillow would look once it's stuffed, and you know, kind of seams stretch a bit, and I'm quite happy with that. Okay, one more thing. Supposing you wanted to sell this full perm and you wanted to supply what's commonly called a shadow map. In reality it's not actually a shadow map, it's an ambient occlusion map. But we can do that as well. So I'm going to create another new texture here, and I'll call it Pillow AO. I normally underscore things, it's just a habit. It comes from days of DOS.NET where spaces weren't allowed. Okay, so I've got this Pillow AO texture. Alright, I'm going to change this from the pillow texture to the Pillow AO, and this time I'm not going to bake combine, I'm going to bake the ambient occlusion. Okay, and let's just quickly bake that and see how things turn out. And while it's baking, as always, I'm going to pause. Okay, and it's done. So it's created this black and white. This is actually not a good example for it. But we will cover AOs in more detail. But you can kind of see, you know, where the buttons would be there, you'll get this dark ring because that's where you'd expect it. Around the edges of the buttons, it's the same thing. It's just not a good example to use, unfortunately. If we look at this in textured view and we zoom in a bit, you can see we've got some kind of shadowing now where we wanted it, where we would expect it, and same on reverse. But that is basically what an AO is. The AO map you could then pass on to your customer if they want to do some texture work themselves and wanted the shadows baked on it. But let's go back to pillow texture. There we go. And yeah, I'm quite happy with that. So that is a very quick and dirty introduction into cycles, into materials, into lighting, and into baking. So there's going to be no prizes for guessing the homework this week, which will be to texture and bake your own pillow.